Hi there, my name is Suzanne Wagner and I'm here with Jason Smith. Both of us are facilitators at the Shades of Intimacy workshop, which will be February 16th, 17th, and 18th in Heber Valley. So, because of all of the news that is happening right now related to the hashtag #MeToo and all this information coming out about women revealing their own feeling of abuse from men, I thought it would be a really good subject to kind of tap into here. So, Jason, what do you find as a man? How do you handle this hashtag Me Too time that we're in? I mean, a lot of the men want to collapse and, kind of retreat, but it's very important for the men to stand up. But also, how do you help men recognize when they're doing something that's being abusive?
It is an interesting situation that we have, and it's a really powerful movement because women are coming forward and saying, hey, this behavior was not okay. And that's a really strong position to take. It's getting complicated, though, because I know men who are very confused. They're really confused. First of all, they've been abused, too, in some way, shape, or form. Sometimes by women, but mostly by the masculine as well, and in some way, shape, or form. In another realm, they've done things that they just didn't know were wrong, right? There's these big ones that are coming up, and they're just so horrendous. It's ridiculous that we all was just like, oh my God, what the hell? But then there's the guy who, was making out with his girlfriend when he was a kid, and he reached over and gave her a kiss, and she said no, and he went, I'll try that again. That didn't work. Let's try again, right? And in that moment, suddenly, he's just trying again for a kiss, but it's becoming offensive and he doesn't realize it. So there's nothing to take away from that. But the bigger picture that I'm taking from this whole thing, and I'm probably really politically incorrect about this, right? Is that what it's really about is the abuse of power. And it really doesn't matter. We've all been abused by power. And here's the shitty thing. We've all abused power. I've thought of times, now this isn't a Me Too thing, but in a context it works. Raising my kids as a single father, there were times when my children drove me so crazy, literally crazy, that I was like, I can't deal with this. And it was just like, I would yell at them or say, hey, go to your room. I acted inappropriately. I had power in situations over them and I used it inappropriately. So I want this conversation to expand for men, because it's not just how they treat women, it's how they treat themselves. They abuse themselves. We talked about porn earlier. This is a kind of a form of just abusing yourself. Getting fat, not taking care of your body is abusing yourself. Getting disconnected from God and the universe, that's abusing yourself. There's these ways that we really can get out of touch with what's really going on. And when we do that, we start to hurt people around us. And more important to this conversation, particularly in Shades, is the subtlety of the way we can abuse women. I have this term I use, it's universally frowned on by everybody I talk to, but it's when a man gets rapey. Okay? And what I mean by that terminology is that you can look at a woman, and literally, man, the way you look can be offensive. Because it can be energetically penetrative to someone who does not fucking want your energy in them. So yes, there's some big things. There are horrible things. And we're all coming to grips with it. And one of the strengths is when women are standing up and starting to say, stop. Right? Stop. No. And that can go all the way to as subtle as, the way you're looking at me is inappropriate. And believe me, man, there is a way to look at a woman with appreciation for her beauty that is not penetrative. And yes, sometimes, so here's the other side of the story. See, I'm just rolling here, right? Here's the other side of the story. A man can be appreciative, and the woman can have her own shit, her own damage of someone else, daddy usually, who abused her, right? And then she comes off on you, and he's like, hey, I'm just here breathing in the energy. I'm not penetrating you. So it's a game, isn't it? I mean, you're a woman. I mean, so what's your response to some of the things I brought up? Because you've been abused many, many times, right? Energetically. And you actually have told me a few stories about getting cornered a couple times that were really actually very, very dangerous. I remember those stories.
Right.
But on the subtle level, it probably happens every day, doesn't it?
I mean, I'm sort of grateful that I had some of those weird experiences, and I'm not condoning them, please understand that, but I'm glad I had some of the really intense experiences, because what I recognized was that a lot of men have never been told that something they're doing is really icky. And so to me, I kind of suddenly shifted and said, when a man does something wrong, instead of feeling wounded and contracting and getting hurt and closing down, just say to him, you know what, that approach is not working with me. You want to try something else.
I have a great story to go with this, and you were there, and so was Jenny. In one of our workshops, I wanted to demonstrate this very specific process. So I had the men line up on one room. I'm giving away a secret here, and the women on the other room. And the men were to practice basically standing there, but to leer at the women, and then to look with appreciation. And based on how the women's reacted, they put their hands over their heart. And if they felt the leer, it would, if they felt that closure, and then they would open. And so the men then practice walking towards the ladies. And just how you walk, just how you look, were causing hearts to open and close. That's subtle. And the great meltdown of the experience was that we had this one guy, beautiful brother of mine named Christopher Sunyata, just a fantastic man, one of the most deepest open hearts ever. But he looks like a murderous, cold-blooded killer. He just looks like a cop gone bad. He can't help it. He just he's into meditation. So when he meditates, he looks like he's about to murder everyone in the room. That's his meditative process. He just looks around. You're like, oh God, he's gonna kill us all. Like he's got that look.
It does.
When combined with the heart, I think women find it sexy. But when they first meet him, they don't know that. So Chris starts the whole thing off, and he gives the woman quite a ways across the room a good leer, like, yeah, I want you, right? And I think she pretty much broke down and crying, and triggered every one of her abuse issues from her childhood. The whole room melts down. The whole room melts down. The women are all in and just howling, me too, me too, me too. The men are like, I didn't mean it. I mean, it was a fucking shit show, right? But it actually did a good job in showing the men the power of how they show up. And what it really means, particularly to their intimate partner. I mean, I know you and I know Jenny put shields up, from getting slimed out in the real world. I mean, you have to, right?
Yeah.
I mean, speak about that. What is that? What is putting a shield up mean? What does that mean? Because you go through a grocery store and, right? If I sent you to the grocery store right now, I don't know why I would send you. But if we went together and you wandered off, got some milk, butter, and cheese, and you came back, chances are some guy would have looked at you wrong.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Just in that short span.
Right, and what most women do is that they actually just go numb. So they actually go numb and they go cold and they go into their masculine so that they're not exuding any feminine energy at all, because our society basically is masculine oriented, and so socially in the external world, especially at work, women have to be in their masculine. So they get very focused, they get very directed, and they're not soft and they're not vulnerable and they're not open. And so it's harder for that energy to penetrate when, a woman is kind of more in her masculine, because again it loses the polarity. So the polarities is that masculine feminine. So most women are walking around like pieces of wood, and they're not sexy and they're not soft and they're not feminine and they're not open and they're not vulnerable, and and that's where the masculine then gets frustrated, because there's just no door, there's no in. But for me too, it's sort of like I kind of I tell the story of that I was in this particular park when I was younger, and I was still a ballerina at the time, and so I had the beautiful body, and I was walking past, and a group of young men go by, and they're like, hey, I want to fuck you, and all this kind of stuff, and they're throwing all this scary, leering energy, and they're all in a car, and I'm walking, and I could feel myself go, and I shut down, and the moment I shut down, my feminine, they actually came at me like wolves, and it became super scary. So that what I recognized is that there's this lower level of men that are kind of on this base level that's all about body.
So they're preying on your fear
They're preying
too, right?
on fear, and that's exciting to them, because like you were saying, it's about the power. So when I contracted, it was like predator prey. So the game polarized into predator-prey, and it was dangerous. It was very, very dangerous. And so it was after that, and that I said, I've got to figure this out. I've got to go to personal growth workshops. I've got to figure out what is feminine. I don't even know what it is. And of course, I worked on it for 10 years, and then 10 years later, ironically, as the universe is, I'm exactly in the same place, exactly in the same park. And I'm 10 years older, and the same thing happens with these men that come by, these young men, and they're like, I want to fuck you. And this time, instead of shutting down, I had learned to stay open. Because I had learned that the feminine is energetically more powerful than the masculine, emotionally more powerful than the masculine, and sexually more powerful than the masculine. And I had learned that I was way stronger than I knew. And so I just opened my feminine more. And I just started swaying my hips, and I softened my body, and I said to them, oh, you couldn't handle it. I think I would hurt you boys, right? And they left. Because they were that lower level man, and they couldn't really handle it. They were looking for prey. They weren't looking to be met. And what we try and teach in the Shades of Intimacy is how to meet each other. And you're really good at that. And so tell us about that. How you help the men and the women learn to meet each other in that polarity, and how it comes together.
Well, I can't tell you that, Suzanne. See, those are the secrets. Like the Shades of Intimacy. That's how we do it. But I want to ask Jennie. See, we're a little we do things differently here at Shades of Intimacy, and so Jennie, in a previous interview, talked about how she started to dress up because her boyfriend's sisters taught her to do this, to allow her feminine energy to come out. And so I'd like you to very quickly come over, take my seat, and explain. You said that your boyfriend responded well, but how did the rest of the world respond? Did you get some sliming in that? So the terminology is sliming when a guy does this. That's like the least, the passive look that is dirty. That's not to suggest that when he's penetrative, raping, and all the really, really negative things that is sliming. But so slime is the general word for just being a general douchebag asshole looking at a woman's tits. So, which I have been. That. Some nice women look by. I was on the beach just a couple days ago, and we were having this serious heart-to-heart conversation. It was 6 men with our mentor, and he was just laying out the depth. And I was like proud, and he said, let's get together here. And I just looked up, and I was like, son of a fucking bitch, here comes this sexy woman in this little bikini walking by. I'm like, just don't look up, Jason. From the masculine, the feminine is so attractive, right? And distracting. So Jennie, real quickly, talk about the way you dressed differently and how it affected you. Then I'll jump back in and answer that question.
Yeah, so I had talked about on a previous interview how I had met my boyfriend and his sisters, definitely dressed a lot more sexy than I did. And so I was like, that's awesome. I'm going to start doing that. And like Jason mentioned, my boyfriend really appreciated it in a very beautiful way. But of course, you also get attention that you don't necessarily want from, and a lot of times it's just men don't know what to do with it. It is beautiful. And so you just don't know what to do with it. And it goes back to really what you said is by meeting it, by not feeding it, and giving it a collapsed attention. So, again, I totally agree with you where you've seen predator and prey. If the rabbit is, when the rabbit senses that there's prey, it freezes and then it runs. Well, what does that do? The predator runs after it. So staying out of that frozen, which is what I did, staying out of that frozen moment, not falling to its same level at the same time and feeding it from that place, but like what you did, actually meeting it from a place of like, really? Come on. And that becomes key. You're meeting them from a place that's really higher than where they're at. And at that point, they don't know how to play that game. Versus playing the game where they're at, which could go on forever, or freezing and collapsing, which makes them want to jump in and attack. So for me, growing up, one of the things I learned, and I had 4 older brothers, so I had a lot of guys around me all the time, and thank God, because they taught me a lot, and their friends taught me a lot. And so I did what you did. I met it at a different level and just met it head on and didn't collapse around it. And at that point, it just dissipates. It immediately dissipates.
Well, and I find it so interesting about how much just passion, like any kind of passion, passionate about dancing, passionate about movement or art, can trigger people into their worthiness issues or their self-worth issues. I remember that a whole bunch of my friends and I, we were at the Park City Arts Festival when it began. We're talking 30 years ago now, and we all dressed up in costumes, and I had fairy wings on and I was dressed like a fairy, and we were juggling and we were doing, and I was dancing, and so we were just having fun, and all the participants there were thinking, oh, this is part of the Park City Arts Festival. These people have been paid to run around and dance and entertain us, right? About half of them thought that, and the other half of them would literally look at me and whisper and say, witches. And I was so shocked, like, I have fairy wings. Like, how did witch get here, right? And to notice,
witch, it's awesome.
Right. And so to notice the projections that people have around anybody being outside of the box, anybody not fitting into the norm. And I know you and I have had that so much because we constantly are trying to stretch that envelope for ourselves. And, you know, we get this backlash, you know, and people have these labels that they put on us, and it's weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what I found, especially with the body, you know, as women, when we use our body in a certain way out in public, you either it's people totally appreciate it or people are like, what are you doing? I remember I was in a women's group with this woman down in LA, and I was walking behind her one day as we were walking into a restaurant, and when she walked, it was like melting chocolate. Like, it was slow, and her hips just, like, it took 20 minutes for her hips to get from one side to the other side. And it was amazing. But there were also so many women and men who were triggered by it and who were looking at it and think she was just doing it for attention. Like, all of a sudden, all these projections and labels came out just because of the way she was walking. And I think that's an important message for women is, you know, the more we live in our body and enjoy it, other people's shit is going to come out. And that's too where you have to go, instead of going into that collapsed prey place, because those people are also predators. Whether it's a man or a woman, they're also going to go after you if you collapse and run. Or if you, again, just level up and meet them where they're at, it dissipates.
So, Jason, shall we drag you back in here now?
Sure. So what was the question? Jenny's hips were swaying and I got a little distracted.
So, you know, we're talking about, you know, how do, you know, you help men notice when they're being abusive energetically. And I talked about how partially it's for women to be more upfront when men are doing that. But, you know, how do you teach them that energy's a little bit off? And I think part of it is that men have a lot of suppressed power inside, and so then when it comes out too strong. And so in our workshop, you know, you teach the men how to really step into their power and own their power. And I noticed that when that happens, their sexual kind of pushing, you know, it calms down, you know, like when they own their power. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. I think we deal with two types of men generally. You know, maybe the alpha male who's kind of penetrative. I want to fuck this, I want to fuck that, and then a little smile on their face, and yeah, if we're working with men like that, and I've been like that at times, that's an awareness thing. If they're in a workshop like this, then they actually have heart and they give a shit, and they care about all the areas of their life. They care about their partnership, and they just don't realize that their kind of jock attitude, which is just very prevalent, and it's nothing to be ashamed about, just is doing that. So it's really just about education, and so. We both have taken that on as a men and women. So I teach the men that, but the women also are teaching the men that. So they're like, okay, the me too. Like, you got to stop that shit. Like, it's not bad. And the way you do it really does matter, because like men of heart will respect. Like, hey, that hurt. What you're doing, you don't realize it, but you know, versus like this accusatory shaming kind of thing. So the
Yes.
shaming piece was really gets the whole thing messed up, right? But the other person is the guy who's been repressing his sexual desires. This guy is just kind of like shooting off firebombs, going, "Hey, nice tits," and doesn't realize. He said, "I was complimenting you," you know. And it's just like, really, asshole. But he actually, if you went into his heart, he was in a way, right? He was just an idiot. Versus the other guy, which is kind of suppressing that desire, and that shit leaks out sideways, and that's when bad shit happens. You know, those are the people I actually worry about. I kind of rather deal with the big guys who are like, "Yeah, nice tits." I mean, that's offensive, right? Mm-hmm. But you start talking to him, and he gets kind of, you know, you find out his heart, and he's just kind of dumb. Versus the person who's, yeah, it's dumb. Like my camera lady just frowned at me. It's dumb. You just don't know. I mean, you know, you're just ignorant. Mm-hmm. And so the person who's suppressing it, that gets a little dangerous sometimes, because that stuff kind of starts to leak out sideways, and it can really get dangerous, actually.
Yeah, I remember when I very first came to Salt Lake City, Utah, and I had lived in Europe, and in Europe they had all the nude beaches, and they had all the clubs, and you could go to the spa and be totally naked, and it was you know, you could have men and women in the same place. And so the Germans are very good with appropriate boundaries and stuff, and so it was considered normal and it was considered natural. So and there were sex shops on every corner too, so there was just this much more overt open sexuality. Then I came to Salt Lake City, Utah, and I remember I was a ballet dancer. Right, it's a shock. And I was over by the temple, and these Mormon missionaries came out, and they're right at their sexual peak. There's all these men at their sexual peak. They're 19, 20, 21 years old, and they had all this tightness in their body, and they threw more really distorted, super scary sexual energy at me than I had ever gotten any place, even in Europe, nude in a spa. And it scared me. It actually scared me. And they didn't touch me, but it threw it at me. And so I think men don't recognize that when they suppress it and it distorts and it comes out, it's like you said, it gets really scary to women. And so learning how to like own your power, own your masculine, move it constructively, and also, you know, having a woman say, you know, I mean, I find for myself, I just say to a man with an open heart, don't do that, it's really icky. just don't do that. And they're like, well, what should I do? And I'm like, well, try this. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But actually give them feedback, because I'm not shutting down because of what they're doing. I understand, because I feel into their heart again, like they're trying, but they're just trying in a way that's icky. And they just don't know.
That's what I mean by these guys, you know, that are idiots, right? I'm an idiot, right? I don't know. I don't know any better. But if you're coming here, if you find yourself in this world, in the warrior world, in the Shades of Intimacy world, this area, then you got a heart and you're trying to get it figured out. You know, you want the deeper connection with your woman. You do. You really do. And you realize that maybe things aren't working the best, and that at some point in time you get real honest with yourself. You're just like, this isn't working. I'm not doing something wrong, right? So how do I get that fix? What can I do?
You do Shades of Intimacy.
Yeah, you do Shades of Intimacy. You do. You invest in yourself. You invest in your relationship. I mean, that's just no shit. You've invested, I mean, probably hundreds of thousands of dollars in yourself over the years. Jenny and I have. I mean, we've done work. I mean, Jenny's father is a doctor. Mm-hmm. Your father was an engineer, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. My dad was an engineer. All these people went extra years of school, and they're just really good at what they're doing. And we expect to really actually be good at relationship with no training, or getting a few words of advice from Uncle Joe or Pastor Bob, who isn't married, by the way.
Or the porn industry.
Like, this shit isn't easy.
Yeah.
This is like work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's fun work though, because the connection, you know, the sex, the connection, the creativity that can happen in it is enlightening, and it can really fuel your life in a deep and potent way. But it takes work. And so, you know, when we're dealing about this Me Too issue, the men who come to me, who man up and have balls enough to say, hey, I want to get this, I want a deeper connection with my wife. It's like, okay, well, first you gotta stop complimenting every woman on her tits. And they're like, okay, I'll stop that. You know, versus the guy who's all like, fuck you, there's nothing wrong with that. And that's a problem. Mm-hmm. You know, that's a problem.
Yeah.
That guy who thinks he's above the law, thinks his attitude isn't hurting other people, thinks he can look at anyone that effectively, you know, what's most disgusting is when you really feel that these men think that women are objects for their pleasure only.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's a very selfish, fucked up thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But even those men, if you kick them in the dick hard enough, can fucking wake up because they realize that shit isn't working.
Right.
Like, long enough that shit isn't going to work.
Right.
It's not going to get you what you want. It's not going to get you connection. It's not going to get you someone who cares about you. It's not going to get you great sex. It's not going to get you creativity and I mean, and it's going to bleed into all other areas of your life. I mean, your body's going to go shit. Your business is going to suffer. Your connection to the universe and God. It doesn't work. That's the best thing about it. In the end, it doesn't work. But you can hurt a lot of people coming to the point where you finally realize that. And so there are a lot of courageous men coming forward, by the way, and saying, hey, yeah, I fucking did that.
Mm-hmm.
I did, and I got no excuse.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they may have an explanation in the fact that maybe no one taught them.
Yeah.
No one taught them.
Yeah.
Like, one thing that we should all be clear about, if in a decade this shit isn't better, then something's wrong. Because, like, the excuse is going away. Like, in the media now, it's now known. And I don't want to get overly politically correct that where, you know, men go like this. There's a woman here, I cannot, you know, I don't want to look at you. I'm not going to look at you. I don't want to offend you. I mean, that's bullshit. Mm-hmm. And I'll be the first to say that. Political correctness bullshit is coming. But there is a subtle way that men and women can interact with each other with grace, with appreciation, with love, and not be offensive.
Yeah, well, and I think that men especially don't understand that subtle works really well on the feminine. And so, I mean, I can't tell you how many times it's like there was this cute guy across the room or across the dance floor or whatever, and he would look at me and you could see that he was trying to feel it out. You know, he's trying to feel it out and he's trying to feel out how open I am and if he can come over. And, you know, how, as a woman, how many little subtle signals I had to send him before he actually came over. And it's amazing how, you know, you do have to be open as a woman to have a man come over, but some men will override that. Because a woman sometimes has to sense you from a distance, and that subtlety
You're just
works.
hammering on a huge piece here, though, and we just talked about this with Jennie. So why did she wear these clothes?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I hate to tell you this, ladies, but so you could be seen.
Mm-hmm.
So you like to be seen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It's like it looks like you got some makeup on, some lip things. It's like, oh, you look pretty nice.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't you just kind of slather some gray ash and soot on your face? Mm-hmm. No, you want to be seen. Mm-hmm. You want to be seen. The light wants to be seen. The feminine wants to be seen. I mean, the sunset, the sunrise, the beautiful storms, you know, the midday heat where the heat rises off the road in those waves. I mean, that always fascinates me. There's nature. Mm-hmm. It wants to be seen. Mm-hmm. But there is a way to see it and to be seen. Hell, there's also a way to be seen incorrectly. Mm-hmm. Are there not women who dress for themselves? That it's not an offering. It's just like, I want to be noticed, God damn it. Notice me, notice me, notice me. There's a lot of complexities in this conversation. You're like opening a little can of worms here.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Well, I mean, I've noticed in dealings with women when I've been working with women, and you know, this is not a stereotype and this is not straight across the board, but I've noticed how many women, you know, did so much for their body, whether that was, boob jobs or, did their hair or their makeup or wore a skin tight dress. And what I found was those were sometimes, not all the times, but sometimes the women who were the most shut down. Like, they needed masculine penetration. They were desperate for masculine penetration, but they actually were not brave enough to really go for it. So I call those the T's. Those girls are the T's.
That is exactly. I dated a girl. Okay, she had the ensemble, right? And it was ultra feminine. And she had just this one flavor, which was just this passive wilting flower. And it was like, honey, it's like, just look at me. Literally, this is kind of what I do. And it was like, so I remember dancing with her once. She was just like, I was like, what are you doing? It's like, well, just notice me, just this. But she had nothing inside. She was like vapid, empty. I mean, the full job, but there was nothing. No one home.
Well, and we have a society that just values the external and doesn't value the internal.
Well, she wasn't even valuing her own internal.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's like that internal was just empty. It was an empty internal, and so she needed a lot of external validation because she had nothing going on the inside. And so, also teaching men to kind of feel beyond the facade, to actually feel deeper into what is really there. I remember with my ex-husband, that we would go places and, some woman would check, he would check some woman out, which is a whole other conversation, but he would check this woman out, and I would be like, instead of being intimidated, because I'm a really powerful, beautiful sexual goddess, so I'm not that intimidated. So I said, what do you find beautiful about her? And he would be like, oh, this and that, and she's got these great tits in her ass, and her legs are beautiful, and look at that beautiful smile, and she seems so sweet, blah blah blah. And I'd be like, okay, now feel underneath that.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, she's actually really difficult. He could feel it.
Yeah.
He could feel it, but it was like he was so infatuated with the package that he didn't realize there were rotten eggs underneath. And so I think also that's one of the ways that, you can help your man see beyond the facade as a woman, is to kind of say, hey, that's a beautiful package, don't be intimidated, but what's underneath that?
Well, I had a few conversations with Jenny about this. I remember when I first kind of learned this thing, I was like, okay, so let's test her, right? And here comes this beautiful girl. It was a sidewalk cafe. We were in California, and I went, wow, that girl's really pretty. Mm-hmm. And she looked over, and I saw Jenny look, and she breathed and she goes, yeah, she is. And then she just kept talking, and I was like, that was simple, right? But then she pointed out to me, it's like, oh, look at this girl. And I looked, and I was like, like I don't think that girl's that pretty, right? And she goes, look again. Like, so suddenly, ooh, there was a different level. There was a different level, and like this swaying chocolate thing that, like, whoa, like these are subtleties of the heart that come in, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we try to pretend we don't have hearts, us men, but it's bullshit. We can feel it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we hope you come to the Shades of Intimacy. It's going to be February 16th, 17th, and 18th. It's with Jennie Stanchfield, Jason Smith, and myself, Suzanne Wagner. We hope to see you there.